Defense, special teams, and Brian Ferentz. These are the three virtues, some might call them vices, of Iowa football. Iowa is a team that is one-sided, bipolar. They embody the phrase, my way or the highway, as college football has left them far behind. More accurately, in a more accurate analogy, college football kicked them off the bus, and while the bus is in California, Iowa is still walking through Kansas, trying to catch up. And the distance between the two only gets further and further and further, and this will be the case until there is change in Iowa. It's just a fact. That is how it will be under the current regime. There's no indication that there will be change in philosophy and in the coaching staff. And don't worry, we'll get to the vice, not even close to virtue. It would be blasphemous to mention Brian Ferentz and virtue in the same sentence. We'll talk about all that in a few minutes. But what this video is dedicated toward is just examining what Iowa has been over the past 3 seasons, especially what Iowa was this past year, and what can they be entering 2023? What can they be? Because with some of the portal moves they've made, and with the returning starters they have, I think Iowa is definitely a team to pay attention to, especially with Phil Parker at DC, with their punter and kicker returning, with a lot of their O-line returning, with them having a main tight end addition in Erick All to go along with who I think is going to be one of the best tight ends in the country in Luke Lachey. So the things that Iowa typically does well seem to all be aligning in Iowa's favor. And they also have Caleb Johnson, who I frankly think is a star at running back. They just have a lot of pieces that I think are coming together. And Cade McNamara certainly tops off all that well on offense. And on the defensive side of the ball, you can expect Iowa to mostly reload, of course. But we'll get into the details of that, talk about some statistics of some of the players I just mentioned, and talk about some past Iowa teams. But first and foremost, what I just want to discuss is the identity of this team and the frustrations, the confusion, somewhat of a rant and opinion just regarding this team and Iowa football in general. This team it's toxic to watch. It makes me sick to watch the offensive ineptitude that is performed by the likes of Brian Ferentz and formerly Spencer Petras and Alex Padilla, who thankfully, because my eyes can't take it, have left the program, either through the portal in Padilla's case, good for him, I hope he gets better development, and Petras has just flat out ran out of eligibility. It's disgusting. This team made a defense that was ruined by Scott Frost and Eric Chinander look like 2021's Georgia defense for 3 quarters. And that's not because Nebraska's defense is good. It's because Alex Padilla and the collection and conglomerate of homeless people that seems to be Iowa's offensive staff is running the show. Development, substitutions, play calling, execution, coaching, performance, everything. Iowa's best offense outside of Sam Laporta, Luke Lachey, and any tight end whose name I don't know, and Caleb Johnson, is the kicker. That is their best offense. Or rather their special teams and or defense, with all the defensive touchdowns that Iowa's managed to get over the past several seasons. They lead college football by far in interceptions. They're known for their pick sixes. They are just toxic to watch. It is akin to watching North Carolina in Drake May or Sam Howell when they had all the offense in the world, Josh Downs at wide receiver too, and their defense couldn't stop me from running the ball. Their defense just allowing anyone to throw or pass on them. Their defense basically lost all of their secondary players to the portal. They're lucky to return Drake May, and they also lost the OC and QB coach that helped build him into an elite quarterback in Phil Longo to Wisconsin. That's the opposite end of the spectrum to Iowa would be North Carolina. And both teams at the end of the day, despite being polar opposites in philosophy, it's sort of like the horseshoe theory in politics, where the two extreme ends of the spectrum are actually really similar. That's like with Iowa and North Carolina. They're unbearable to watch. And part of it is coaching. Another part of it isn't just the on-field coaching and scheming, it's recruiting too. Because if you have incompetent coaches who are good at recruits, you can hide some of the ineptitude and some of the incompetence, i.e., Texas A&M before this past season. Mario Cristobal at Oregon, and I think you're going to see the same thing at Miami. It won't be because Mario Cristobal's a better on-the-field coach and game manager. It's because he's recruiting better. His coaching won't ever be great, but his recruiting's amazing. That's his strong suit. The problem is Iowa is neither when it comes to offense. They can't recruit offensively, again, except for tight end and offensive line. Skill positions are just dead, forgotten, and they struggle to develop there, and they struggle to execute, and the play calling is just disgusting. Iowa did not even have 10 passing touchdowns. In fact, Iowa had 7 passing touchdowns on the season, 7 interceptions, and they couldn't run the football at all. They averaged 2.9 yards per rush and 5.8 yards per pass. That is worse than 2 teams who had some historically diarrhea offenses in 2017 Michigan and 2018 Michigan State, who had phenomenal Iowa-like defenses. But they played in the tougher East Division. Michigan got an 8-5 record in 17. Michigan State got a 7-6 record. I don't know how in 2018. If Iowa played with the abomination of an offense that they had this past season in the East, probably would have went 6-7 or 7-6 at best. More likely than not would have had a losing record. I mean, I have not seen an offense this bad from a Power 5 school. I haven't. Most people haven't. But that's what you get with Brian Ferentz, and what I think, and I think any competent person will see, is nepotism. Iowa has, an NIL collective. Kirk Ferentz is paid $7 million a year. You don't think Iowa could get a more competent OC than Brian Ferentz? Of course they could. Of course. And that's the most humorous, ironic, and painful part about it. If you're an Iowa fan or a college football fan, or if you're a Nebraska fan, this just makes you fall back in your chair and point at the TV and laugh, is the fact that they don't want to. They're not going to. So the solution to any of Iowa's offensive woes will never be removing Brian Ferentz. It won't be, because it's not going to happen. Again, until Kirk Ferentz retires, until a new head coach comes in and a new man takes over, which, who knows, Kirk Ferentz is 67, but maybe he will want to coach until his late 70s, early 80s. And we'll get to this in a few minutes, but he certainly can do it if he wants to. I mean, he's still winning 8 to 10 games a year. His teams find ways to win. They're still mentally tough. And despite the fact that there are a lot of frustrating things that are going on at Iowa, namely the offense, the team has finished in the AP Top 25 4 out of the last 5 seasons. From 2018 to 2021, they were ranked anywhere from number 25 to number 15. They're among the top 25 best teams in the country. And 2022 Iowa, according to sportsreference.com, was a top 30 team according to the simple ranking system. They were 29th. So this year's Iowa team, let's say if they beat Iowa State, who finished 4-8, or Illinois, who they only lost to by 3 points, or maybe they beat both of them, and they finished 10-3 with one of the worst offenses in the country, or 9-4, same thing, they probably would have finished ranked, which is just, to me, horrifying to think of. But it doesn't take much, honestly, to be a top 25 team, in the sense if you're already a Power 5 team. It really doesn't. Because being a top 25 team is a whole lot different than being a top 15, top 10, especially top 5, top 4. It's really when the requirements, the skill, and the talent to become a high-level team, the gap between number 25 and number 10 is actually closer than the gap from number 10 to number 4. Like, it really gets to be a steep climb the higher you go in the rankings. It really does. I don't think Iowa in their current state can be a top 5 team or top 10 team. Punting is winning. Special teams, defense, Brian Ferentz. The virtues, the unholy trinity of Iowa football. But it works. It absolutely works. And that's one of the confusing things about it. Because at the beginning of the year, when they lost to Iowa State, and when they, lost to Ohio State, lost to Michigan, lost to Illinois, at some point they had a losing record. I'm thinking to myself, this team's not going bowling. They can't get anything together. Their defense is phenomenal, but Spencer Petras is either overthrowing his receivers by literally a mile, because he has a cannon for an arm but no accuracy, or he's throwing interceptions, or he's taking sacks. Iowa allowed 38 sacks to quarterbacks. 38. That is extremely uncharacteristic for an Iowa offensive line. Iowa had a historically bad offensive line this past season, which to a certain degree you could look at that as a positive because it is an outlier. And they return a lot of production on O-line, and they bring in 2 offensive line transfers. So I think that was more of an outlier than anything else. But overall, Iowa has had at best a top 40 offense over the past 5 years. The worst came last year, ironically at the same time that the best defense over the past 5 years came. Iowa in 2022, they scored 17.7 points per game. They allowed 13.2 points per game. But Iowa returns most of their roster, especially the offense, and they add several offensive portal additions. So, I'm just saying it right now. Erick All, Cade McNamara, roommates, captains at Michigan, both good players when they are healthy, and when, in Cade McNamara's case, when he has a good supporting cast, and in Erick All's clutch, he saved Michigan's season in 2021 at Penn State. Total NFL build, kind of like a hybrid wide receiver tight end build, 6'4", 225. I like those 2 additions by Iowa. Picked up relatively quickly. NIL was involved. More importantly was the fact that Cade McNamara wasn't going to start next year at Michigan, and Erick All was coming off of an injury, and there was some miscommunication regarding whether he was medically cleared. At least that's what I've heard. But now he's at Iowa. Same with Cade. And Daijon Parker, Rusty Feth, and Deacon Hill are some other transfers, along with Seth Anderson, a wide receiver. Anderson's not listed yet on 24/7 Sports Hawkeye recruiting class. Not yet. But all in all, look, this team has, with these additions and with what they return on offense and how they reload on defense, they do have potential. And I think winning the West is a real possibility here, which is horrifying to say the least. But at the same time, Northwestern is nothing. Nebraska is going to be rebuilding under a new head coach, though I think they do have a high ceiling. Purdue, rebuilding. Minnesota lost basically everyone, including their offensive coordinator, and I don't think their new OC, it's Matt Simon, and then there's another co-OC. I don't think they're going to be as good as Shiraka. And Kaliakmanis has to do more before I give Minnesota benefit of the doubt again. I gave them that last year, and they flatlined in the biggest moments. Wisconsin is probably the biggest threat to Iowa when it comes to the West, just because it's a road game. The Badgers have the most talent in the West outside of Nebraska, and Luke Fickell is a top 10 head coach. He has a top 10 defensive coordinator in Mike Tressel, and possibly a top 10 offensive coordinator in Phil Longo. They also got Tanner Mordecai in the portal. They'll have the Big Ten West's, I think, second best or best quarterback. Casey Thompson and Tanner Mordecai will certainly contend for that best quarterback in the West spot. And heck, Cade McNamara, I think even Cade McNamara could contend for that, honestly. People forget that he was a baller in 2021. Yes, his supporting cast helped him a lot, but isn't that the case with all quarterbacks, except for the bests of the bests, like Bryce Young, for example, in 2021? And even then, 2022, he didn't look as good because, wait for it, he didn't have amazing wide receivers like John Mechie and Jamison Williams. So even he was somewhat of a product of supporting cast. And I think that's something that we all forget with quarterbacks and with college football, period. It's a team sport. The team is what matters. Having one good player and everyone else being garbage is not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. And that's the thing with Iowa. See, this is what I like about Iowa, and even like a team like North Carolina. Overall, they're not top 10, but they still figure out how to put together a team. It might look lopsided. It might look weird, funny. They're not going to have the same high ceiling that a more balanced team will, but they provide entertaining football because they're outliers. And sometimes it's completely not entertaining and I don't want to watch it, but other times it's like, let's see if they can do something new that's never been done before. Or other times, I don't know. It's just, Iowa knows how to put together a good team. They know how to put together a cohesive team. They know how to build a perfect defense, a perfect special teams unit. They traditionally have known how to build a great offensive line. We'll see if they can do that again with what they have returning there, and I think they will. Their tight end room is just stacked. I mean, look, Luke Lachey was second in the team in receiving yards with 398. He led the team in receiving touchdowns with 4. He led the team in average yards per reception. For players that had 10 or more receptions, he averaged 14.2 yards per reception. Nico Reganey, their only returning starter on wide receiver, he's returning 386 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown. Arlen Bruce IV is in the portal. That is the case along with wide receiver Keegan Johnson. At running back, we have Caleb Johnson, who's returning for Iowa. Caleb Johnson, he rushed for 779 yards, averaged 5.2 yards per carry, which was by far the most for any of the Iowa running backs. And he had 6 rushing touchdowns with a long of 75. He is impressive. I'm telling you, Caleb Johnson is one of the better running backs in the Big Ten, which immediately translates to be one of the better running backs in the nation. And with Logan Jones returning, Connor Colby, Jennings Dunker returning, Mason Richman, Nick DeJong, and Daijon Parker coming in through the portal, along with Rusty Feth. Listen, the offensive line, it's going to get better. I think that's almost a given with the amount of returning production that's there. Will it be a world beater? Will it be the traditional Iowa offensive line? That's what we'll have to wait and watch for. But they have a ton of production returning on that offensive line. And Cade McNamara, listen, Cade McNamara is an infinite upgrade to what Iowa has had at QB over the past 3 seasons. In 2021, he completed 210 passes out of 327 attempts. He completed 64% of his passes. He threw for 2,576 yards, averaged 7.9 yards per pass. He passed for 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He had a 141.9 passer rating, and he got sacked 11 times. And half of those came against Georgia. I don't even think Iowa will face Georgia just because of the fact that those two schools play in two different universes of football. I don't think Iowa will even face a D line that will be as vaunted as Georgia's. And with the supporting cast improving, with Erick All, with Nico Reganey, Seth Anderson, with, again, Luke Lachey, I mean, that might be the best tight end duo in the nation. It might be. Brock Bowers is certainly the best single tight end in the nation, but Lachey's very underrated. Erick All has sadly been forgotten because of an injury. When you get injured and you're sidelined for the entire year, people, they forget about you. That'll be one of the best tight end rooms in the nation. I think it'll be the second best tight end room in the nation, honestly. This team is built to improve offensively. And there will probably be some defensive regression. Riley Moss leaves, Kayvon Merriweather leaves, Jack Campbell, Seth Benson at linebacker, John Wagner, Lucas Van Ness. But Deontay Craig, Joe Evans, they return. Iowa should have one of the best D-lines in the conference. Cooper DeJean, that's the team's best corner, and he's coming back. Quinn Schulte, Sebastian Castro were highly rated players, both on PFF and just from looking at statistics with their pass deflections, interceptions, and tackles. And Phil Parker always coaches a competent secondary. Lastly, Drew Stevens at kicker and kickoff, and Torrey Taylor at punter. They return, and Cooper DeJean was the primary punt returner. Caleb Johnson at running back, the kick returner. They return. So special teams, it'll be, I think, by far the best in the nation. Defense will be top 10. And I think the offense will crack the top 100, which may not sound like a lot, but let me end the video off on this. Imagine this season if Iowa had a top 100 offense and scored like 21 points per game. 21, scoring an extra 4 points over the course of 13 games is scoring an extra 52 points on the season. An extra 52 points with all the close games they played, whether it was Iowa State, whether it was Illinois, Nebraska, heck, even Michigan, although at the end of the day that truly wasn't as close as the score indicated. They could have went like 10-3, 9-4, dare I say 11-2. Though I think if they won 11 games or even 10 in the regular season, their bowl, the opponent they faced in the bowl game would have been too highly ranked, too deep, and just too competent for a team that's that one-sided to beat in Iowa. But you get the point. Iowa football is an anomaly. They are an outsider. They are an outlier. The way they play football, they should not be winning. They shouldn't be successful, in theory, by the way they play football and the modern standards of college football. But I am telling you, watch out for this team. Because Cade McNamara and Erick All can connect. Luke Lachey, he led an offense that was practically non-existent in touchdown receptions. He's big, he's physical, he's long. The offensive line returns tons of production. Iowa, there's this they're under the radar. They're very much hated. There's definitely some locker room motivation that I think is going to go on. The main thing holding Iowa back is, of course, Brian Ferentz, which is really unfortunate because you give Kirk Ferentz a different OC right now, I'm not even kidding you. This team would probably be top 10 if there was just a different OC than Brian Ferentz. Whether it's Sharon Moore from Michigan, whether Brian Hartline what if he wanted to call plays and Iowa was the place he did it. Kevin Wilson, even Jay Johnson, heck, even like Paul Christ as OC would be miles better than Brian Ferentz. This team is really held back by the way they play football. But despite that, they still are a team that I think is top 25, top 20, heck, maybe even top 15 caliber. And it's because their defense, their special teams, and what they have on offense. They have a quarterback who was rated top 20 in QBR, top 25 in QBR in 2021, and who had a 140 passer rating. You give Iowa Nate Stanley, CJ Beathard, Jake Rudock, JT Barrett only passing the ball, level QB play, and Iowa wins 10/11 games. And that's what they have at quarterback. They have better pass protection, and they do have receivers. They're just called tight ends instead of wide receivers. So Iowa is set for what I think is going to be a year that is going to have possibly double-digit wins to it, and what I think will be a top 2, top 3 finish in the Big Ten West. Make sure to hit that notification bell so you can get notified when I release official predictions for the Big Ten Conference, and when I officially go through the schedules for Iowa, for Wisconsin, for Nebraska, Minnesota, Illinois, Purdue, Northwestern, the Big Ten East teams, and even all Power 5 conferences. Hit the notification bell, subscribe to this channel to help me on my journey to 10,000 subs, comment your thoughts down below, and please like this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you around. Bye.